Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. Hope you all are doing good and safe. Yeah, I'm Parv Kumar. I'm Microsoft certified trainer and I'm associated with SSDN Technologies. I provide training on Azure, Windows Server, Office 365, into a lot of Microsoft technology. And apart from my training, I also provide consultation. I'm Microsoft certified trainer. Along with that, yes, I have a lot of done a lot of certifications like Azure Solution Architect, DevOps Engineer. I will guide you through this course, like what we are going to cover up today and over the time. This is what the agenda for the day. First, we'll cover up, try to understand that what actually this cloud computing is and what are the benefits of cloud computing. Different type of cloud models, when we say it's public cloud, private cloud, what these all are, and the type of the cloud services like your software as a service, platform as a service, infra as a service. We'll try to learn about this, and then we'll discuss about the core services in Azure, like how the Azure cloud is built. If you have a requirement, then we'll also have demos part where I'll walk through the demos, like creation of a VM, virtual machine, the storage account, and app service. And afterwards, we'll discuss what is the way ahead to start your cloud journey. So why there is a requirement of cloud services? So if I ask me that cloud computing, it's not a new concept. It is being in existence, like we all are using Gmail. So that means Google is able to provide its services over the internet. So I can say the cloud computing, that's it's internet-based computing. That means you are able to deliver your services. The moment I say services, it may be a compute service. When we say compute, means it's your processor, your CPUs, your memory. You are able to deliver your storage, you are able to deliver your networking or any other software services, like maybe analytics or any other services over the internet to the user. That is what the cloud computing. So it's the internet based computing. That means you are able to deliver your services over the internet. When we discuss about the cloud computing, major service providers are Microsoft, that is Azure, Amazon, AWS is there, and Google, they have their GCP cloud platform, that is Google Cloud Platform is there. So that means they are the cloud providers. They have the physical hardware, that means they have their data centers, and which you can think of it that we are taking that hardware on the rent and they are providing me services for that only. So as per our requirement, we choose which provider we are going to choose. So they all have the better SLA associated with them. That is what. So why do we need to continue that? Why the cloud computing that is there? So that if you look at the problem statement, that as on date, if I have to provide services to, let's take an example, we are an e-commerce company and we have to provide services to our customers. That means we have to, the problem statement is that we need to buy the servers, we need to buy the storage, we need to manage the physical site, that means physical infrastructure, we need to provide the physical security, then we should have a trained manpower, like your storage, the network, different kind of as per the services which you are deploying. That is the problem statement why organizations said. That means every hardware has a life cycle. Why the organizations are moving to cloud? This is the main, that means that they want to save on their cost. This is the main reason why they are moving to the cloud. We'll discuss in the subsequent slides about all this. These are some of the benefits and the concepts which we need to understand before we move ahead. The first, we'll try to learn about the high availability. That means my services should be available to the end user. Let's take an example. If Amazon is doing its e-commerce business and Amazon marketplace, e-commerce marketplace is down for 5 minutes, what will be the loss? It will be a huge loss for the company. That means their services should be highly available. That is the concept of high availability for a longer period of time, and there should be very minimal downtime. That scalability is as and when my user base starts increasing, I should be able to meet the user requirement. So we'll try to understand it with the example. Let's take an example. We are using Ola's cab service. At 9:30 a.m. every day, they know that okay, there will be people will go to office, and there will be requirement to the people will be booking more cabs. That means they have running their applications to cater that much of load. But what happens, they were not thinking of, they have not planned that due to some reason there is some electricity failure has taken place, and due to electricity failure the people have started, there is a off in your company, and at that particular time people starts booking cabs. That was not predictable by the Ola cab. So at what time happens, the user base has increased and they are not able to meet the user requirement. That means my solution should be scalable. That means I should be able to meet the user requirement, that is scalability. So you have a option where you can increase your resource and you can decrease your resources as per your requirement. There are two concepts over here. We will discuss that concepts also, scale out and scale up. So let me go to my whiteboard and explain. That two type of scalability is there. One is your vertical scaling, and one is your horizontal scaling. Vertical scaling means you are increasing the size of your resources. Let's take an example. We have a VM. The VM has 2 cores and it has 8 GB of RAM. And now we have a requirement where we need to increase this size. That means from 8 GB we need to increase it to 16 GB of RAM. Or we need to increase the cores from 2 to 4 cores. That means we need to scale up. That is my vertical scaling. You will increase the resources of scale up. And as and when required, when there is a requirement, you can bring down these old resources. That is what this is my scale up. And this is your scale down. You will bring down your resources as and when required. But yes, it has some downtime. But nowadays organizations, what they are following the horizontal scaling. So what happens in horizontal scaling? I have my 2 app servers, my application servers are running. That is my VM1 and my VM2 to handle the user workload. But my user base has increased. So what happens? Automatically my another app servers will start. My VMs will start so that I can handle the request. So it will be from 1 to 10, the way you define it. So we call this process as a horizontal scaling, and we call this process as a scale out. So you have more instances, VM instances available with you so that you can meet the user requirement. And when the workload, you don't have that much of requirement, your user base has started decreasing, the VMs will shut down automatically. That is the concept of scale in. That means the VMs will shut down automatically. That is the concept of scale out and scale in. Then global reach. Yes, now let's take an example. We have our services hosted in, we are operating from India and we are able to reach our customers, but now we want to expand our services and our customer base, let's say we have set up one of our, we want to provide our services to US customer base. So it becomes very difficult, because if my service is hosted in India, it becomes, there will be a latency, network latency involved from the US. If the customer logs into website and he wants to purchase anything, it becomes very difficult. So we have a global reach. That means I can easily target my audience and we can reach to our audience easily. That is, so any region where the Azure, any of the cloud service provider is there, I can easily set up my services over there. So if my user base is from US, I can easily set up in the US. It may be Australia, from any place you can easily. Now agility is, again, we need to understand, that is how fast you have to operate. So if I ask you, if someone asks you that you need to provision 100 VMs on premises, yes, it will take some time for me to provision the 100 VMs. Because when you have to provision 100 VMs, before that you need to think of, do we have the physical hardware available with us? That time we'll find, okay, we don't have physical hardware, we don't have network stack, we don't have storage stack available with us. But in case of cloud, yes, agility, you have to provision 100 VMs, you have to provision 1000 VMs, you can provision 1000 VMs on a click, or you'll find that within a time span of 5 to 10 minutes, you are able to provision your VMs. That is my agility. That means how fast you are able to react. You can easily allocate your resources, you can create resources, you can delete resources as per the requirement. Disaster recovery. Again, disaster recovery is that, let's take an example. This is my site, that is my on-premises site, and I am running my business from here. Whenever there is any kind of the disaster, it may be natural disaster, it may be any kind of the disaster, how will I operate in that case? So what organizations are doing, they are using cloud service providers as a DR site. So what happens, all that they keep on replicating their data to the clouds which is near to their location, their own premises, or as per their policies, as per the compliance requirement. They copy their data over there, they replicate their data over there. In case of any disaster, they can easily start working from, they can recover from that disaster from the cloud, or it may be vice versa. The organizations, they have a policy when they have their cloud, that is on the Azure, they have their services, their workload is running on Azure, and they are using on premises as a DR site as per the organization policy they are using it. Fault tolerance, again, we need to understand, the moment we say fault tolerance means if there's some kind of the hardware failure has occurred. So let's take an example. I have two servers where my VMs are running, or let's take an example. We'll say this is my rack 1 and this is my rack 2 where my services are running, my VMs, my physical hardware. There is a network failure over here in this rack, or it may be power failure in this rack. How will I recover from that? That means my services should be available from this rack. This is one kind of the, to avoid any kind of the hardware failure. Yes, in case of, if we have deployed our services in cloud, we need not to bother about the fault tolerance, because all that this has been taken care by Azure. We need to choose the availability as per our requirement. Okay, the how fault tolerance, what kind of the fault tolerance you want to achieve, and just they have a associated SLA with that, they will provision all that. So we need not to bother about the hardware failure, all that options. Elasticity is there. That means how can you increase and you can decrease. That means if I have 10 VMs, I have requirement, and now I have a requirement of 1000 VMs, I can easily provision the resources. That is the elasticity you have. Customer latency capabilities, that I can deploy my services near to the user so that we can overcome all the latency issues which has been faced by the users. Now, productive cost considerations, yes, over the time, what will be the cost if we, let's take an example, if we have 10 VMs running in cloud, over the 1 year period of time, what will be the cost associated with that? We can easily predict and we can minimize, like this is the service, these services we don't require, we can disable that services, we can delete that resources as per our requirement. We can easily predict our cost. And security is there. Yes, by default, all the cloud service providers, their data centers are audited by the organizations, and that is data is secure over here. And if you look at that, by default my data is encrypted. Whenever you store any data, your data is encrypted, and they also provide you the option where you can encrypt it with your own key and multiple layers of security. So when you talk about security, we discuss something called like layered approach. So I have layered approach where, so this is what my physical security. The physical layer, yes, they have guards, everything is available over here. Then at every layer, at the network layer, when I say at the network layer, we have security over here. They have deployed the DDoS to prevent the DDoS attacks. They have deployed all the mechanisms like how can they firewall and all that stuff is there. So the security is there at every layer. But yes, when it comes to like as a user, as a customer, what is there? What we are storing over here? We are storing our data. By default, the data which you stored over there by default is encrypted. It is encrypted by default, and we have a option. It is encrypted using the key which is managed by Azure. So we call it platform managed key, which is managed by Azure. You can use your own key. That means the concept we call this as bring your own key, and you can encrypt your data with your own key. So it is encrypted. You need not to bother about that. Security is there. Yes. We already discussed that why the organizations are moving to cloud. This is the main reason. If you remember earlier, only the startups, they were moving to cloud. But now all the Fortune 500 companies, they are migrating their workloads to cloud. What is the main motive behind that? The main motive behind that, they want to save their cost. Earlier, they were not migrating because were not that confident, okay, what will be the security and all that steps, what will be the status of these data centers. But startups, they had a problem with them, the cost association, because initially, if you, let's say, if I want to build up my own data center, it requires a lot of money I need to invest a lot of money. If I, for startups, yeah, getting funds is difficult, so that what they started using the cloud service providers and public cloud service providers, and now all the Fortune 500 companies, they are migrating their resources because their hardware is going to expire now, so they need to purchase new hardware. Instead of that, what they think of, okay, let's move to cloud, where they can save their cost. So cloud service providers, they can help us to really reduce our costs and efficiency as a larger scale. That means we need not to bother about purchasing of hardware and provisioning of hardware and trained manpower, all that we need not to bother about, because that has been taken care by the organization. So now there are two types of expenditures, basically, that is capital expenditure and operational expenditure. When we say capital expenditure, this is what the initial value. We discussed that, yes, if there's a startup, they are setting up their data center, so they need, it is a associated cost, that is upfront cost associated with that particular, to set up the data center. They need to purchase the hardware, they need to build a data center, they need to purchase they need to pay for electricity, that is all. And over the time, what happens, the value of the investment that starts reducing. But in case of, when we move to cloud, we need not to bother about that. Yes, this capital expenditure, I'm not bothered about that. I'm just bothered about my operational expenditure. That means you will pay only for the services which you are going to use. If I have a requirement in a month, if I have a requirement that, yes, I have to run 100 VMs for a particular VM, for some proof of concept, or for 1 month, yes, I will pay only for 100 VMs. Next month, if I need only, I can delete my 100 VMs, I can shut down my 90 VMs, and I can run only 10 VMs. That is what. So I have to pay only for 10 VMs. And that is, again, you have to pay for the 10 VMs. We pay only for per hour. The billing is per hour basis. We pay for the seconds. Let's take an example. If my VM was on for 4 hours and 59 minutes, I have to only pay for 4 hours and 59 minutes. That is all. So it's a consumption based model, basically. And this is my consumption based model, that we call it as a pay as you go model also. So you are only, as a organization, you need to pay only for the resources which you are consuming. The advantage of it, that there is no upfront cost. You need not to purchase any hardware. You need not to manage that infrastructure. If you have on premises infrastructure, that means you have to manage that infrastructure. You need not to manage infrastructure. Before going into this, I'll go through one of the URL, like where we'll discuss. Go through, so that you guys can understand that what is the main reason why the organizations are moving to any of the cloud service provider and Azure. So we'll discuss about the total cost of ownership. If you run your resources on premises, what will be the cost associated with that particular on premises? So what we are assuming over here, that means I have my workload, that is Windows server we are running. We have physical servers, operating system we are using Windows or maybe Linux, and I have 100 servers available with me. For every servers, I say I have only 2 processors, and for every processor I have 4 cores, and the RAM is available with me. Okay, let's say 128 GB. I will say. Apart from this, we are running some of the database. Okay, any workload which you are running, I will say I will running SQL database, physical servers, Windows. Let me choose it. I have 10 servers. My processor for 32 GB RAM. Let me say. And storage, I am using around 50 TB of storage over here. A backup, for backup I am using 20 TB, and for my archival I am using 30 TB of storage. And I will say click on next, and if I select over here, okay, it will go through the estimates. So it gives me the figure that over the 5 years, if you migrate your resources to Azure, this will be the saving 5 years. If I say, okay, instead of 5 years, I will take 1 year time frame. So this will be the saving for an organization. That's the main reason. They need not to bother about the power failure. They need not to bother about any storage failure, any kind of hardware failure. This is the main reason why the organizations are moving to cloud. So look at it. So you have a lot of options. You can go through this total cost of ownership calculator, Azure, where you can understand, like when I say you have a data center cost, where you need to understand what is the like you need to have that kind of trained manpower associated with you who can manage that. If you pay them $23 per hour, what will the cost associated with that? But in case of Azure, that cost will come down. So we need to understand that anytime you can start your resources, you can shut down your resources, you will only pay for the period when your resources were on, and you have an option where it will predict your cost over the next period of time, what will be your cost associated with that. Now we'll discuss about the cloud models, that is your public cloud, private cloud and hybrid cloud models, and which suits you most. That is, as a customer or as a organization, if you to choose which one suits, you have a requirement. We'll discuss about all these models. So public cloud, all Azure, your AWS and GCP, they are the public cloud. That means cloud service providers, so the hosting providers, they have hosted, they have built up the data center, and now they are providing the resources where you can create your resources, and the resources are shared between the organizations. So multiple organizations and users, they are using that, and normally we access all our resources over the internet, that is using a web browser, you can easily access. So they have their dedicated tools, apps are there, using that you can access your resources. So if you look at that who has the ownership in this case? The ownership is with the cloud service provider. Right? So now ownership, you need to understand the ownership is with the cloud service provider. That is, in case of Azure, it is with the Azure, that Microsoft is the owner of the service provider. But at the same time, the data, like you as a user, you store your data over in the Azure cloud, that data ownership will always be with you. That is what we'll discuss, one of the shared responsibility model, where what is the responsibility of a cloud service provider and as a user, we are going to discuss about that also. You have multiple users, like different organizations are using the same service, that is there publicly, it is accessible, anybody can choose, and as per their requirement you can use it. And this is one of the mostly used, that public cloud is the one of the mostly used cloud service model, deployment model is there. And now how will you connect to your cloud? So when I ask you, how will you connect to your cloud, that is what, over the internet. But over the internet, normally people use the VPN. It will be my VPN. Over the VPN, I will connect to my. So if you say, let me again go through and draw one diagram over here. So this is my on premises. This is your Azure. So your Azure is there. Okay. From here, I will connect to Azure. So on premises, that is what, how will you connect to that? You have the various connectivity options further. So you have VPN gateway. Using the VPN gateways, you can connect, or using the express route. That is something, express route is what your lease line concept. It's a private dedicated connection between your organizations, and that is what the Fortune 500 companies, they use this express route. Basically, they have more bandwidth requirement, they use that. Else the organizations, they use the VPN gateway. And let's say my user, they want to connect to, as a administrator, IT administrator or cloud administrator, I want to manage the resources over the Azure. At that time, we also use the VPN. We call this concept as a P2S, that is your point to site connectivity for the users. We call this concept as a site to site connectivity. Now second, you don't need the more skills to manage it. You don't need more skills to manage it. That means in case of on premises, what happens? Your user, they should have a knowledge about the network, they should have a knowledge about the that again the specific, like the, if you are using Cisco switches, your network administrator should have a knowledge about Cisco switches. Your network administrator should have knowledge about your firewalls. That is, but in this case, you don't have that kind of, you don't need that much of in-depth technical knowledge, you don't require that. any IT administrator, he can perform the task of a network administrator, he can perform the task of a storage admin and all that, because that underlying infrastructure is hidden, underlying hardware resources are hidden. We need not to configure it. We have to just configure it as per our requirement. So I'll discuss about the private cloud. The private cloud means it's your own data center, and that you are the owner of your organization is the owner of that particular data center. That is your private cloud. So here we can use only the resources. The resources are shared only within the organization. That is good. And how do we achieve it? We can use, like when it comes to cloud computing, how it is possible? It is due to the virtualization stack. We can use VMware, we can use Hyper-V, any kind of the virtualization stack over here. And so let's take an example. That means I have a hypervisor. I have hypervisor, on top of that my VMC is running. And how can you build up this private cloud? What happens? We always use some concept called self-service dashboard or self-service portal, where the users can create VMs as per their requirement. They can access their storage and all that. That is the self-service access within the organization. But you need to understand that means it is within the organization, and the organization has the responsibility. They have the responsibility for physical security, for the hardware management and all that. They have the responsibility. And if you have two data centers, if this is your own premises data center, that is at my location 1, and this is my location 2, here how can I need to build up? Like we always achieve the connectivity using the dedicated linked or maybe lease line kind of concept we use for that to connectivity. So it is highly secure. So in which case you have to use the private cloud? It may be that we use the private cloud when we can't, as per the organization or as per there is some legal or compliance requirement that the government says that you can't store the data in public cloud. In that case, what happens? We use the private cloud, where to store that data which can't be shared between which can't be stored in a public cloud, we'll use the private cloud in that case. And this is what, if you look at the organizations, yes, they are operating in the hybrid cloud mode. Big organizations, they are not totally on the public cloud. There are some services run from public cloud, some services they run from the private cloud, and we call it as a hybrid cloud. So it's a combination of both public and private cloud, so that you can run your applications as a requirement. So if you have a legal requirement that you have to, you can only store the data. So my database server will be hosted in my own premises. My data is stored over here, but my web application or my application server is deployed in public cloud from where you are accessing it. Different kind of options are there. It may be the case. Let's take an example. I have my own premises Active Directory. So I have my own premises Active Directory from where you want to sync your identities. You want that you have created, you have some around 1 lakh users available with you. So now if you want to use the services available in Azure, you need not to create the users in Azure. It will be synced automatically. So that means my Active Directory server is deployed in my own premises, and my other services are in Azure. That means I can say it's a one kind of the hybrid cloud example. So you have the more control as per your requirement. The data which you want to store in your own premises, that is your private cloud, you have more control over here. Yes, but here the catch is that you need the technical skilled manpower to manage your own premises or your private cloud infrastructure. You have to need that. So I can take one of the example when I have a web server. From the web server where my application is hosted, and my application needs to communicate with the database, but as organization requirement, the database needs to be stored in a secured place. So my DB is running over here. This is one of the example we have to use the hybrid cloud. Already one of the example I shared you. You have on premises Active Directory and you have Azure Active Directory. You can sync the identity. That is it. Another example, if I say, let's take an example. I have my applications which are running in mainframe. Some legacy applications which are running on mainframe. In any of the cloud service provider, you will not find the mainframe hardware over there. all cloud service providers, they normally use the commodity hardware. Nowadays they are using HCI hardware, but that is your commodity hardware which is easily available. They don't use the mainframe. So if you have a legacy application which runs on mainframe computers, yes, in that case you can't. In that case you have to use you can't migrate these applications to Azure. You have to use hybrid cloud in that case. These are some of the examples. If I had to compare these models, so the advantage of public cloud, that means I don't need a capital expenditure. If I want to scale up means I want to from 10 VM to 100 VM. If I have to scale up, I don't need any capital expenditure in case of public clouds. You have an option, you can easily create a service, you need not to buy any license. That license cost is included in the type of the resource you are using. That license cost is included in that. You can quickly provision your resources, you can deprovision your resources as and when required, and I will pay only for what I have used. This is, so it's a consumption based model. Private cloud, organizations, they have complete control over resources, and but obviously you have the complete control over your security also. In case of public cloud, when you say you have to use, like when we discuss when will we use the private cloud or maybe hybrid cloud, that means there are some security requirement which the public cloud provider is not able to. You are not able to meet that security requirement in public cloud. I will use my. Now every organizations, they have like if you look at the some of the compliance regulation authorities, like your GDPR is there, HIPAA is there, various regulatory authorities are there. You have to fill. If in case of credit card information, my PCI DSS is there. So how can we achieve that? In that case, you have a requirement that you can't store the data. If you need to store the data should be stored in a encrypted way. To meet all that requirements, I will use my public cloud. And this, I told you that yes, most of the organizations, the big organizations, they are using hybrid cloud. You have more flexibility. So as per your requirement, you can store the data. You have the flexibility, or you can decide which data I want to store my on premises, that is my private cloud, and the hybrid cloud on premises. So you have a control on the services, and that is the. But in case, yes, I have control on my compliance and legal requirements, I have control, but you need to understand over here that yes, you have a OPEX, my operational expenditure will come in that the services which are running on public cloud, but my capital expenditure will come in place the services which are running on my own premises. I need to purchase the hardware and I need that kind of thing. I'll take on some of the questions from you, like if you want to ask me some questions. Yes, like Deshmukh has asked me that what if I pay on a yearly basis? If I show you like Azure, they have a options, we call this as a hybrid benefit. If I go to Azure cost calculator, you have options where you can reserve your resources for 3 years, maybe 1 year. So let's take an example. In Azure, if you want to host a VM, let me choose one of the VM. And now here you have the option like what will be the cost associated. So in India, they have their data centers at 3 places. So I will say I'll go to Central India, that is Pune. I want to use Windows operating system, and I have 10 VMs over here. Let me choose over there. And this is what the VM requirement, or I will say I have a with 28 GB of RAM, I want to use it. And my VM will remain switched on 24/7, that is 730 hours in a month. So if you choose the pay as you go month, pay as you go, that means it's monthly. My cost associated is $7,613. But the moment you say 1 year is out, your cost will come down. That you need to understand. So that yes, you can reserve the resources and you will find a lot of discount over there. So you are able to save a lot in that case. They have their like that concept, that is Azure hybrid benefit, that is bring your own license. If you have a license which you have purchased for on premises resources, you can select that also, and in that case your cost will be saved. is there. Any other questions you want to ask me? Okay, let's continue with the next topic. Yes, Seti, you can. You have the options. If you look at the cost calculator, let me again go over there and show you where you can reserve it and you can pay. So you just need to reserve and you can pay per month on basis of that as per the requirement. Okay, now we'll discuss about the different kind of the cloud services like infrastructure as a service, your platform as a service, and software as a service. Infrastructure as a service. So let's take an example. If I have to build one of the VM, to build one of the VM, if I have to host my service, I have to for that VM. What do I need? These are the building blocks for any service. If you have to host any of the service, so I need the servers and storage. That means I need the compute, I need the storage, I need the network, I need the firewall, security, and data center physical building. Infrastructure as a service, these are the building blocks for any organization. Like if you want to host any of the service, these are the building blocks. To host any service, to amplification, I need all these things. I need the servers and storage. To host your storage, you need the network, you need the physical data center. That means I need the power and all that. Infrastructure as a service, if any of the organization, they are selling this. That means they are providing you this infrastructure where you can create your VM. So that is one of the example of infrastructure as a service. And this is how these big companies like Azure, AWS, they are earning. That means they purchase the hardware at a lower rate and now they sell it or they give it on rent so that they can earn from this by providing the services as per their requirement. So yes, you don't have any upfront cost in this case. You want to use if you want to create a VM, you need not to pay anything, like you need not to pay for server and storage, you need not to buy anything. There is no upfront cost associated with that. But who has the responsibility? If I say that yes, who has the responsibility to update this VM, to manage this VM? That is your responsibility. We need to understand in the cloud, there are the two roles. We need to understand this role. User, or I can say it's your customer, and provider. So when I say provider, means it's Azure, it's AWS, it may be GCP, any other provider. User and customer, like it's any organization, or it may be a home user, any kind of the user. It's a organization basically. So now if I have to create a VM, so VM is one of the example. Now if you say how the VM runs, the VM, that means my VM runs on top of what? If I say I have a data center, this is my DC. In the DC, I have let's say these are my racks where my servers are installed. These are my racks, and in the rack I have one server. So this is what my server, I can say, let's take an example, we are using ESXi, VMware ESXi. Now on this hypervisor, what we create? We create the VM. As a user, we have options like we can create the VMs over here. Now you have the freedom to create a VM. So I can say now the Azure, what they are doing, they are providing you the infrastructure as a service where you can create your service. But when I create a VM, so every VM, what it has a operating system. Now it has applications. That application may be IaaS, it may be Apache, it will be different kind of applications, and actually what it contains your data. Now who is the responsibility to manage all this? My operating system updation, my applications management, my data management. Who is responsible for this? My user is responsible for this. That you need to understand. In case of infrastructure as a service, yes, user has that responsibility. Cloud service provider, he is only responsible to provide you this infrastructure, that my server, your server should be available. That means your VM should be, in case there is a failure over here, your VM will be available from here. That is the responsibility of the cloud service provider. But you have to manage your VM. That is your responsibility. So in which case, if I ask you that when we have to use the infrastructure as a service, initially when you say you have to perform the migration of your workload from on premises to Azure, yes, I will use the infrastructure as a service. So I have some of the VMs which is running my on premises. I have options where I can easily migrate it to Azure. So using the some of the migration service, Azure Migrate service or third-party tools are there, you can migrate. The way they all are hosted your own premises, the way they will be migrated over here. So we call this concept as a lift and shift migration. That the way it is on premises, we can use over here. I can further. So the concept, I can say the lift and shift. I can use that. The second, I can use it for my test and my deployment. You want to, I will use, let's say my organization, they are carrying out some kind of proof of concept. I can use that. So easily you can create your VMs in the organization, you can create your VMs in Azure and you can use that. I can use it for website hosting. That is one of the example. I can use it for my storage to store some of the data. I can use it for my backup and recovery purpose. A lot of examples are there. You can use the infrastructure as a service. Over here. A platform as a service. Along with these resources, now in the infrastructure as a service, if you look at the problem statement, like I as a user, I am responsible to manage the operating system. I am responsible for the tools, the application. That is what. But platform as a service, now the provider is responsible for these services. Like he is responsible for the uptime of operating system, the VM, the updation of VM. That he is responsible. He is responsible for the provisioning of that service. So before going into theoretical part, let me explain you platform as a service. So we'll take a simple example. If I have to host a website, and my website is that I need, it's a PHP based website. To host this website, what we need a operating system. So operating system, let's take an example. I need a Linux, or it may be Windows. Then what I need to do, I need to install any of the web server. That means any of the app server. App server, I will say I will install Apache over here. It may be Apache, it may be NGINX, it may be different. In case of Windows, yes, you can use IaaS also to host your PHP based websites. Now what do I need? I need the runtime. The runtime is that my PHP. Now again, when it comes to runtime, it may be PHP 7.3. So it may be PHP 5.6, which is outdated, but still people, the legacy applications are using that. So it may be any version of the PHP. The runtime may be, if I associated it along with the PHP website, if I say it may be my .NET Core. .NET Core is runtime for me. Java is runtime. That is. So now as a user, you are responsible for all this. You are responsible for your operating system management. You are responsible for your app server. You are responsible to manage this runtime. And on my application runs, it needs that runtime. So in platform as a service, what happens? These all things has been taken care by the provider. So you just need, I want to host a website, that is PHP based websites, and you just need to specify which runtime you want to use. So if I show you in the portal, let me go in the portal and I'll say this is the Azure portal. You just say, and where I will show you that how this platform as a service it works. So in portal, I'll cover up all these parts over the time in the demo. So what happens? I have to, whenever we create any resource, any service, what happens? I need to create a resource group over here. So the resource group is nothing, it's a logical grouping of the stuff. I will say webinar. Okay, my webinar. Now I want, what will be the name of my websites? This is what being hosted by Azure. So I will say AZ-104. Let's see whether it is available or not. Okay, I will say ASP. Okay, it's available over here. So now here you need to understand that I need to select only one of the runtime stack. I will say I want to use my PHP based runtime. So okay, I want to use PHP 7.3. I want to use Python, Ruby, different runtime is there. As per your application requirement, you can select. I say I want to use PHP, or I will say I want to use .NET 3.1. Now, which operating system you want to use? I will say I will use Windows. This is my region, where the region is what? These are data centers where the Azure data centers are located, and you can select, as a best practice, we should select the region which is near to me, near to the user. So I will say, let's take an example. I will use the East US region. So platform as a service, you need to understand over here, you have the freedom. You need not to manage the underlying infrastructure as well as the platform that has been taken care by the Azure, the service provider. Let me click on review and create. We'll come back after some time. It will take some 3-4 minutes to create it. We'll come back and see it after some time. So now you need not to bother about the platform, my operating system, app server, and runtime. This is one of the example. If I give you another example, let's take an example. I have a SQL database. To host this database, again, I need a operating system. I need to install my SQL server. Now I have to manage the, but I have to host my database. That means I need someone who can manage my operating system. I need a system administrator, like it's a Windows administrator, maybe Linux administrator. I need a SQL administrator. And now I have to ensure the high availability of it. I have to, but as a user, I want that my database should be, I don't want to, like any organization, when they, one thing which we discussed, that is you have to save on your cost. Along with the cost, what the organization they look from? They look from that the administrative overhead. I don't want to, my organization don't want to get into any admin overhead or any management overhead. They want to avoid this management overhead. And that is what, where this platform as a service comes in picture. Yes, I don't want this admin overhead, this management overhead. I need that I have a database. My database should be up. So Microsoft Azure will provide you this platform as a service. That is your managed instance is one of the service name over here. So SQL database, where you need not to bother about the underlying infrastructure, underlying platform. You say I want to host one of the SQL database, my database will be provisioned for me. So Azure will be managing this. This is the responsibility of the Azure. You need to understand. So the ownership, this ownership remains with the cloud service provider. Now software as a service. We are using this for the past many years. Like Gmail is one of the example of software as a service, where mail is a service and which they are providing. So who is managing the mail application? Google is managing the mail application. Outlook, Hotmail, these all are the example of software as a service. So that means the organization which is providing this service, they are hosting it in their data center, and they are providing this service to the customers. This is so the example is what Office, like if from the Microsoft, the product is what Office 365. That is an example of your software as a service. That is there. So now the application is hosted by the user, by the provider, and they are responsible for management of that. So how do we buy this service? If you look at the Office 365 service or any other, like in the Google, they have G Suite. We normally purchase a license. It's a user-based license. For how many users you want to purchase a license, that means you can go for a monthly subscription as well as the annual subscription also for that. Advantage over here, that means in all these models, there is in this software as a service, because it's basically available on the public cloud like Salesforce CRM, that is again software as a service. So that is what there is no upfront cost associated with this. The ownership is what? Now this application ownership is with the provider. They are responsible for any security vulnerability and all that. But yes, ultimately when we say data, the mail which I am storing over here, that is my responsibility, that you need to understand. The cloud service provider, the service provider, they are responsible for management of that. That is software as a service. is one of the example over here. So if I have to compare all these services, you find that infrastructure for all these services, like we don't have any upfront cost associated. Infrastructure as a service, you will find that it's a consumption based model. That means you have to pay only for what you are using. In case of software as a service, you have to pay as you go pricing, but you have to pay for a monthly, like the monthly or maybe annual subscription, the way you are purchasing over here. That is there. So you can need not to develop any application. You can easily use the existing application. You can use that. So let's take an example of, we are doing this webinar on Zoho. So what kind of the service it is? It's a software as a service where the SSDN is using this service. They have not developed their own application to host a webinar. They are using the Zoho webinar service. So you can think of that it's a software as a service where they are charging you for the number of users, maybe the hours you are using it. They have their own pricing mechanism, the software as a service. Yes, but at the same time, like the software as a service, you will find that if you want to customize it further, you don't have that freedom to customize it because you don't have control on the source code and all that. But the service providers like Office 365 and they are exposing everything using the REST API. You can easily write your own code and you can use that. You can query the database and you can query the mails and you can create your own dashboards. The options are there. People are using it to develop the business. So if I ask you that whether Microsoft Teams is an example of what? It's a software as a service example. It's a part of Office 365 suite only. And now when we migrate our workload to Azure or any cloud service provider, we need to understand that shared responsibility model. That means for kind of the application, the kind of the service which we are using, who is responsible for what. If you look at that on premises, that is your private cloud, you are responsible for all the stuff like your storage stack, your network stack, compute, physical hardware, you are responsible for all that stuff. But these are the different models which we discussed. So the infrastructure as a service we discussed earlier, the cloud service provider, he is responsible for the compute, network and storage. On top of it, if you create a VM, it's your responsibility. Operating system, the management is your responsibility. You have to protect it, you have to ensure that your VM is updated, your applications are updated, your firewall is on, it should have antivirus, all that stuff, it is your responsibility. The moment I say platform as a service, your responsibility is what? Only your data. That means when I say data is your responsibility, and the access, that means access, who can access your data. That means the applying of ACLs, giving permissions, this all is your responsibility. Cloud service provider has no control on this, it is your responsibility. And the applications which you are deploying on the runtime, that is your responsibility, that is your platform as a service. And the software as a service application will be provided by the provider, and you have data and access where you have to. So you need to understand that your data is your responsibility. Who has access to your data? It is your responsibility. You can't say my data was hosted on cloud and now it has lost due to cloud. No, you can't blame them. It's your responsibility. That means when you have to say the security, encryption of your data, the backup of your data is your responsibility. And that's the where the organizations, they follow the practice. Like if I say we are using Azure, so my some workload will always run on Azure, but at the same time we'll run some workload from on premises, we run some workload from AWS, we run some workload from the GCP as per the organization. We call this concept as a interoperability. That means I have an option where my some workload is running, because tomorrow if we find that something is wrong with Azure, something is wrong with AWS, we can easily migrate, where services are available from any other cloud service provider. So we need to understand the shared responsibility model very well. From the management overhead, if I ask you that which model should we use? Like if you want to avoid the management overhead, let's take an example. If I have a CRM service available, if my organization, they need some kind of the CRM service, what kind of the model you will use? You will use the software as a service model. So you have less admin overhead, less management overhead. You have to just cater your, you have to just manage your permissions, you have to manage your data. That is the, okay. Any questions till now? If you want to ask me any questions. Yeah, Priyesh is asking, we'll get recording copy of this webinar. It will be uploaded on YouTube. You can go through that. Yes, again, Danish is asking me, platform as a service is better or infrastructure as a service? I will say platform as a service. If it totally depends on the business requirement, but when you ask me, you have to host a website, I will say use platform as a service. When you say I have to host a SQL database, yes, use the SQL. But you need to understand that means that in the platform as a service, you have less control on the underlying infra. In infrastructure as a service, you have more control on that. So in most of the cases, we'll say you should use the platform as a service. When it comes to cost and the management, the administrative overhead, that yes, it is less overhead compared to this. But I hope Danish Shetty, I have resolved your query. Yeah, sure, we'll share the link once it is updated. That is. Yes, but if you say that you have some legacy applications, you won't be able to host it in the platform as a service. In that case, you have to use the infrastructure as a service. And when we say legacy, if you look at that nowadays, the people talk about something called cloud native applications, like the microservices. If you look at the how the cloud is built up, it is built up using the microservices architecture. So you might have heard about this microservices architecture. How the cloud is built up, it is built up using the. So now Sandeep is asking me, if I want to run my application, then SaaS service I can use. No, your application means you can't use that because it's your own application. You have to use, in that case, you have to use platform as a service. SaaS as a service means the existing application. Let's take an example of any email application, like the Office 365 is there. Yes, that is an example of your. That is an example of software as a service. But yes, you to host your own application, you can use either infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. If that runtime is quoted, you can use platform as a service. And this is why the organization. Let's take an example. I will say we'll discuss about this Salesforce CRM. How they are saying they are hosting their. They have their VMs, they are using the platform as a service model because again they want to add. So they are using, this is what I will say, platform as a service model they are using. And on top of that, they have hosted their CRM application. And now they are selling it to customers. This is their application. And now they are selling it to customers as a SaaS product. So now we'll discuss about some of the components, like we'll try to understand from the Azure perspective, core components, we'll try to understand it. So when region, that means region, what is region in Azure? That means region is nothing, it's a location where my data center is situated. So you will find that worldwide there are the 60 plus regions, and in most 140 countries their data centers are located in Azure. In India, the data center is located at 3 places. That is your Central India, we call it, the region name is Central India, it's Pune. Then West India, Bombay, that is Mumbai. And South India, that is your Chennai, that is located over there. So now you have your options, like where you have the flexibility, that means where you want to host your services as per the requirement. If I say my user base is US based, I will host my services in West US, which is near to the user. That is it. Second advantage over here is what? The data residency. If you look at the GDPR regulation, what did the European Union GDPR? It states that the data pertaining to the European Union residents, it should not cross the European Union geographical boundary. How do you achieve that? That means if I store my that data, if I have a application where I need to store this data, I'm capturing this information about the users, and it states that the data cannot cross this geographical boundary. Like we can't store it in India. It's a violation of the law. In that case, I can achieve. That means how can you say it preserves my data residency? I can choose one of the data center of European Union, and that is the maybe UK, any other place. You can choose the data center and you can store your data over here. That is, I can say I have stored my data center over here. That you need to understand. You can select the regions close to your users. Yes, that is what already we have discussed. For the better to overcome the latency issues, I can choose, I should always choose the region near to the user. That is there. Some services like Azure, they have a lot of services like VM is one of the service, app service, global database. There are a lot of services are there. Some services which are global services. The moment I say global services, that means the services are like, it's a Azure Active Directory. It's a global service which is available. That means it is not specific to rest. All services are specific. So let me draw one diagram and try to explain that how actually this all the cloud service providers, how the Azure is built up. So I will say, I'll take example of these two regions over here. I'll say this is my central India. That is my Pune region, Pune location, and this is my Chennai. That is my South India region. This is my region over here. So you have Azure data centers over here. You have in the Chennai also. So here I have a data center. So I will say my DC1. I have my DC2 and I have my DC3. So I'm just giving you data center 1. It may be the more than DC1, DC2, DC3. It may be 10. It may be 100 as per the way Azure has designed it. Same over here. You have different data centers over here. So you need to understand that the region means a location here. So my workload, my VMs or my services are running from any of the data center. I will say from this data center, this is my data center. So it may be from any of the data center my service is running. These data centers, they have their different power source. If I look at it, you'll find that they have different power source for these data centers. These data centers will have different power source. This data center has different power source. This has different power source, different network connectivity. Because if there is a failure of the power, if there is failure of network connectivity, my services shouldn't impact. My service will start running. If I say, let's take an example, my service is running from here. What will happen in that case? My service will run from here. That is what to avoid. That is, they all have different power source. They all have different network source, and they all are interconnected with each other. So this is one of the reason. This is my reason, and what I am achieving now, the Indian government law says that your data should not cross from one boundary to another. That means from that geographical boundary, I say I am achieving my data residency over here. So if I need to store any of the data, I will store it within India. That is there. So the reason you need to understand, it's the location where the Azure data center is located. So some of the services which are independent, that means the reason independent, let's take an example of Azure Active Directory. That is one of the services which has no dependency on that gets replicated to all over the world where the data centers are there. But yes, the region dependent services is there. Let's take an example. My VM is running over here. I have a network over here. That is region dependent. If this region is down, my service will be down. Yes, there are the many ways how do we achieve it. If my service is down, if this region goes down, it's a major disaster. We always keep on replicating our VM to another region, so that my service will come up. Once this region goes down, my service will come up from another region. The way we achieve it. But now this is regions dependent service. You need to understand. Storage, your network, these are region dependent service. This is what the region pair. Why do we need region pair? Any kind of the disaster happens. It may be natural disaster, it may be any kind of disaster due to which your service, one of the region has gone down. That means all the data centers in a particular region has gone down. That means in that case, which region will act as a standby for this particular? This is what predefined by Azure. So they have some thumb rules, ground rules for this. That means at least it should be 300 miles away if possible in a region pair. So I have, let's take an example. I have, say this is my central India. So the region pair, it is my South India. If the central India Pune data center, Pune region goes down, South India is standby to that particular. My services will be provided for the South India region. Vice versa, if the South India goes down, it will be run from here. This you need to understand, that is your region pair. So depends on the type of the services, they automatically provide the replication to different in some of the cases the replication is automatically, like in case of storage service, some of the services we need to configure that replication as well. Any type of outage has happened, they will say which region they will recover first. So they will say I will recover the central India so that my services are available. If there is a failure over here, let's take an example, within India all the 3 regions has gone down due to any reason, so they will recover, okay, South India, so that the services they should come up, they have their own plan for that, they prioritize it out of the pair, one region they will bring up automatically. And they also have a policy, like when they have to perform any kind of the maintenance activity, they have to install any patches, they have to install any firmware upgrades and all that, they carry it out first to one region, not at the same time. Once successful in one region, then they will carry out in another region that is there. And of the same geographical, yes, this peering is on basis of the geography, so that you can store your data as per your requirement over here. Resource group, again it's the logical grouping of my resources so that we can easily. So when you say you have to take an example, I have a, what is this resource group actually, we need to understand. So a resource group, let's take an example, we have a business unit, let's say sales department. So sales department, they have a requirement, they need 5 VMs, they need 1 DB server, so they need 1 DB server, okay, they need 1 load balancer, a lot of resources they need as per their requirement. So at some point of time, so that means the sales department, IT administrator, he should be able to manage it, I have to give permission. So what we do, we always create a resource group. I will say I will create a resource group and I will give it a name of it, sales RG. This I'll give it a name, sales RG. And now these all resources is a part of that. So it helps me, I can define my policies over here, my ACLs, my security policy, any kind of the policy which I can define over here, so that the IT administrator who has permission to this sales resource group, who is the owner of this resource group, he can manage all the resources underlying in this group. That's the logical grouping. It's a container which groups. It's not a physical thing, it's a logical thing. It's a container, every resource it belongs. So if those who are working from the IT, like those who are working of the Active Directory, they know something called OU. So you can think of that resource group nothing as a OU. It consists your resources. So I can apply my ACLs, I can apply my policies over here. This is my resource group over here. And on basis of that, you can easily use you can create your resources, you can give permissions over here. You need to go through, that is your ARM template. You have options like ARM template. How do you manage your resources? We manage our resources with the help of management layer, that is my ARM management layer. And this is what the hierarchy in Azure. I have management group, I have the subscriptions, then under the subscription you have different subscriptions. So your organization, they have a enterprise account, they have purchased the subscriptions, but to manage all that subscriptions, we always create this management group where we can define our policies. Then subscription may be specific to a resource, specific to a department, it may be business unit, maybe location specific. This way we manage our resources over here. Compute, what are the different kind of services? So we have the compute services. When I say compute, means your processor, your memory, that all in your compute it belongs to. So a lot of services are there. I'll go to the portal, I'll show you the demo of that. And you have your options, you can easily provision your resources, compute resources over there. These are some of the compute services available. Some of the services, a lot of services are there. So I'll say Azure VM. Basically, we use it when you want to create your own VM. You want to have more control. I say VM scale sets is nothing. We use it for our horizontal scaling. So I have one VM, my two VMs are running, and on basis of that, I can easily expand. Now I have app service already. I've shown you that is platform as a service, but it basically provides me the compute service. The functions is again one of the service. It's a serverless where I want to perform some kind of compute. I can use the functions. It's a serverless function. We'll discuss it. Okay, let us go through some of the demos. I will go through one of the demo where I can create my VM. How to create a VM. Okay, before that, let's say I have created this app service. I will show you. This is my app service I have created. And if you look at this application service, there is platform as a service. This is my URL. And if I access this service, my website is accessible. So it is accessible. Now I can change the content of that website using the deployment center, using the CI/CD pipeline, DevOps pipeline. I can change it and I can manage my website. So it becomes, so I need not to bother about the underlying infrastructure, where my website is running, what is the operating system and all that. You need not to bother about it. This is one of the example of platform as a service. We'll also create one of the VM. How can we use the VMs over here? So let's take an example. I want to create one of the VM. You just need to think of that within 4 to 5 minutes my VM will be created. So this is what the resource group. I say I have already created one of the resource group webinar. I will use that and say my demo -web1. I'll just give it a name of dev1. Where do you want? And I'll not go through the options. What are the various options available, or we'll discuss it later on. And there you can choose the size. What is the requirement as per your requirement? So I'm looking for 8 GB of RAM. I say instead of that, I say I just need 3.5 GB of RAM. And you can specify your username over here. And I'll just click on review and create. I just want to show you that how easy it is to create my VM. So my deployment has started. Within 3-4 minutes, my VM will get created. Till time, I have already one VM available with me. I will say I'll access that VM. So if I look at that, here I can easily, this is what the public IP address associated with that. The size of my VM, that is 8 GB RAM. I'm using 2 virtual CPUs I'm using over here. So I can easily connect to my VM using the RDP, that is remote desktop protocol, using the SSH. Normally in case of Linux, we'll use SSH, or maybe best in it is the secure connectivity. How can you connect to your VMs securely? And if I say I want to connect one of the VM, I'm able to connect to my VM. This way you can create your VM, you can upload your resources over here, and I can easily manage my VM over here. That is what you need to understand over. The deployment of another VM is under process. So if I go to this VM, you'll find you have all control, like what is the network IP you want to use. You can write your rules, the firewall rules, ACLs you can specify. You can, if you in future, if you have a requirement, you want to increase the size of your VM, that is scale up, you can change it to 16 GB of RAM. Yes, it will have downtime, but you can specify all that. So a lot of options are there. We'll think that if I have the option like I want to reset my password, I've forgotten my password, I can reset my password from here only. Some of the options over there. So, and you have options where you can specify different kind of data, that is your structured data, semi-structured data, the kind of the data you can store it in the storage account. That all options are available over here. Same way we can also create a storage account. Let me go through that app service, platform as a service, and let me go and quick demo of how can I create a storage account where I can upload my storage account. This is storage account. Storage account is basically where you can store your data. So this is what storage account. Already I have a storage account available with me. I can create it, and where I can store my data as per my requirement. I can store the data. If I say this is one of the data lake storage, I can use it. I want to use the file share. I can create a file share which users can access. So I need not to bother about the underlying infrastructure. So when I say container, where I say, let me create one of the webinar, the permission, I will give it the read permission over here. You can easily, and I say, here I can upload some of the images over here. So let me download one of the, well, I'll upload any of the text file over here. Let me create one of the text file. My file is uploaded over. Now I can easily access it if I click over here, and if I say I want to edit, I can type in. If it is normally most of the cases it happens of test data, I have the options. I can save it. A lot of options. I can download it. A lot of options are there as well. You have a control. You want to give permission only for a smaller period of time. You can give the permissions over there. That is there. Now apart from that, yes, this is what the Azure marketplace like. You can use the firewall provided by Azure, but apart from that, you want that, okay, I want to use the firewall which is by the Cisco next generation firewall. I want to use that firewall. Yes, if you go to Azure marketplace, you will find that you can easily, all the providers like the firewall providers, all the service providers, they have uploaded their images over there. You can use that, and you can use the Cisco next generation firewall, maybe Barracuda firewall, different in your organization. As per the requirement, you can usually use that from the Azure marketplace. I don't know what is the reason. Okay, it has come up where you can think of the different kind of applications. You can search for that and you can use that. So I can specify. So all the service providers like Barracuda, Cisco, they have their account and they are publishing their images to Azure, and anybody can use that. Yeah, they have their charge associated with that. You need to pay over it. So if I say, I just want to say Cisco, you can search over there and you can use different kind of say. So we can choose any other, like say this is MCase, you want to use that MCase. It's for the forensics, they're using that. Okay. Anyhow, let me come over here, the marketplace. A lot of products are being listed over here by the vendors. Okay. So now we'll discuss about the path. What is the path available with us for the certification? Like it's a intro, what I was covering, that was an intro to Azure. But over the time, like there's a career in cloud computing, and we normally start with as a cloud engineer, and over the time when we gain some experience, then we look for the portfolio like the solution architect and that kind of the portfolio. So Azure, Microsoft, every year they carry out the job task analysis, and on basis of that they keep on updating their course material. This is what, how can you, if you are thinking of building up a career in cloud, and this is what the future, I will say, you will find that after next 1 year or maybe 2 years, and due to this pandemic, now the organizations, now they are thinking that they have to move to cloud, so that they need not to bother about any kind of the underlying infrastructure, the management, they all are moving to cloud. So there's a future in that. You should think of that. How can you start your journey? That is what, this is what the foundational course, which is not mandatory, AZ-900. It's a one-day course where we learn about the fundamentals, some of the fundamentals which I have covered up. Now afterwards, if you are from the development background, you can think of this certification, that is Azure Developer, where you can build your solutions using on Azure. If you want to build your service, you want to deploy your solutions, that you can, how can you build your solutions? How, if you want to use the Azure storage account, that is what we learn in the Azure. So the course name, that exam name is what, it's your AZ-204 for that. But this is what we always suggest to anyone. If you want to move it, you want to go for security, you want to go for DevOps and all that, you should always start with the AZ-104. This is what the base for all the other roles. AZ-104, again, this is optional exam. AZ-900, you should go, you can go through this training, but AZ-104, where that is the Azure administrator, where we are going to learn all the in and out of Azure. How can you easily manage your resources, how can you create, and you can, so this exam is specific to the cloud administrator role. Once you clear this exam, you will get that Azure administrator role, and afterwards, if you want to go for any certification, that is expert level exam, you can think of Azure DevOps. that is AZ-400 is the course code for that. You can go for AZ-400. So the prerequisite for AZ-400 is that either 204 or 104. Apart from that, if you are from security background, that you're thinking of a role like Azure security engineer, you can think of AZ-500. That is again, but for AZ-500 also, it's not mandatory to undergo this training, but you won't be able to understand anything. I always say that this is what the basis. If you know this AZ, if you have gone through this training, and if you know about AZ-104, then it becomes very easy to for you to learn, because in this we are going to cover up most of the services provided by Azure, which is required for a particular role, that is cloud administrator role. So what is the way ahead? What you start plan for, like you should attend the 104 training, and I will cover up that why should you attend this training with SSDN. In this training, what we are going to cover up, it's the standard course of 32 hours, that is 4 days course, 32 hours course, but what we will be covering AZ-900, the fundamentals, and our course will be of 40 hours duration. And we focus on theory, but apart, because you guys need some kind of the hands-on experience. When you have to face any interview and you have to perform, that hands-on experience is really going to help you. We always have main focus on the labs. We share a lot of lab guides with you. We ask you to carry out a lot of lab guides, labs, so that you gain some experience on that Azure. And now afterwards, you can think of some other certifications for that. You will also get a $100 voucher. You need not to use your credit card. That you will provide you $100 voucher, which will be valid for 30 days. You can use that. Apart from that, we'll provide you the official courseware of Microsoft, the access to recorded session, that you say. And over the time, when you guys feel that, okay, I have gained some experience, you have gone through again to gain the experience. Like you have two options. Either you are gaining that experience in your organization, but if my organization is not Azure, but I want to make a career in Azure, in that case, I'll suggest you go for the labs. Do labs. There is no alternative to that. If you carry out the labs, you will learn a lot from that. And afterwards, you can think of the Azure Solution Architect Expert Certification. That is basically your 303, AZ-303 and AZ-304. If you write these two exams, then you will become the Azure Solution Architect Certification. That is there. I'll